For as long as he could remember, William Hall had worked in the medical field. The man was born into a family of hereditary physicians. His mother was a pediatrician and his father was a therapist. From a young age, William's parents instilled in him a passion of medicine and a respect for the medical profession. As a result, none of William's acquaintances were surprised when he went to medical school after graduation. Mr. and Mrs. Hall were ecstatic about their son's academic achievements. William showed excellent promise in surgery, according to his teachers, and after graduating from university, he would most certainly be employed by one of the greatest private clinics. Fortunately, his teachers' predictions came true, and the man went on to become a successful surgeon. William was stumped as to why he chose this particular career path. Maybe it was because he thought surgery was the most essential branch of medicine. It was at this time that William met Monica, with whom he would spend the next 15 years of his life. It's important to note that the couple rushed into their marriage, which resulted in a divorce. Meanwhile, William's parents told him that Monica wasn't a good fit for him because the two young people were too dissimilar. Monica was a great fan of living large, and meeting her needs wasn't always simple. Unfortunately, William didn't understand his error until it was too late, costing him some of his most formative years. When the prominent surgeon discovered that his wife had been cheating on him for the past 3 years, he was devastated. But the fact that she did it with William's best buddy, whom he had known since their days university football team, stung him the most. William Hall did nothing extraordinary. When he found out about the affair, he didn't make any commotion. Instead, he filed for divorce and left the couple's house. Despite the fact that their marriage failed, they did have a daughter together who is now a teenager and has chosen to remain with her mother following their divorce. The fact that Henry Young was a wealthy businessman who could afford to make great gestures and expensive gifts explained at least part of his wife's choice of a lover. William realized William was well aware that his pay would not be sufficient to lavish champagne on his wife and fund her monthly holidays to the islands. As a result of becoming single again, William Hall purchased a puppy and began focusing on healing his wounds, attempting to ignore the reality that he was 4 to 5 years old and that half of his life had already passed him by. The surgeon's sole solace was his job and his devoted dog, Spike, whom he considered a close buddy. William Hall became the first chief physician of the clinic, where he worked for 17 years, as a result of his effort and dedication. Following his appointment, William promptly put the institution in perfect order and enforced like discipline. The clinic personnel immediately recognized William as a gifted manager as soon as he was hired. The chief would have considered himself a very lucky guy if hadn't been for his personal failures. Meanwhile, not everyone in the clinic welcomed the new head physician's ideas, which included tight adherence to job descriptions and internal standards. However, William believed he was good at his work and paid little attention to the angry employees. William Hall began each morning by personally touring around the rooms and monitoring the condition of the patient, in order to remain on top of everything that was going on in the clinic. The man would sometimes just talk to them and give them honest answers to their inquiries. The patients always smiled after speaking with William and expressed confidence in their ability to recover quickly. The chief arrived into Camille Anderson's room during one of those morning rounds, roughly a month after she had been hospitalized. "Ms. Anderson, how do you feel today?" the chief inquired, as he always did to respond to the man. The patient could only smile and give him a guilty expression, which told the chief a lot. "I see. Don't be concerned. I'm confident that you'll be able to speak once more, Mrs. Anderson. The car accident that you were in certainly caused your illness," explained the chief physician, who was moved by the attractive patient's flight. Camille couldn't speak and had trouble moving, so William was kind with her. Mrs. Anderson simply happened to be one of William's favorite patients. That was due to the woman's bravery and enduring all the treatments, never complaining of pain or inconvenience. Camille's husband, who was many years younger and behaved as though he were in a boutique at a restaurant rather than a hospital, was the only visitor she ever received. The surgeon was skeptical of the young man's sincerity because he constantly came with a permanent Hollywood smile on his face. Something about this young, attractive man seemed off to William. Furthermore, William couldn't help but observe tears in the eyes of his favorite patient after each of his visits. Those weren't happy tears either. "Why are you crying, Mrs. Anderson? Do you have a concern about something? Do your husband's visits have anything to do with it?" The surgeon inquired, feeling embarrassed, but all he got was a patient's strange silence as she desperately tried to disguise her sentiments for everyone around her. William understood the woman was concealing a mystery, but it was an easy one cover. The chief physician, on the other hand, was preoccupied with his own issues, which he never had time to address. But then something happened that threw everything into disarray. It all began when a new nurse began working in the trauma department. Dorothy Parker was the new employee, and William Hall personally interviewed her for the position. The seasoned doctor took advantage of the chance to educate the new personnel in the clinic's policies and procedures. Dorothy Parker made a favorable impression on William during the interview. She appeared to be an expert in her subject. The nurse appeared to be in her 30s and was well-versed in all medical words as well as the nuances of her job. Dorothy, on the other hand, was very secretive about her prior job and supplied almost no information about it. William was perplexed at first, but he eventually decided to let it go, knowing full well that the clinic was short on nurses, and then losing such a qualified applicant would be foolish. As a result, William was delighted to offer her the job, and the next few days demonstrated that he had made the perfect choice. Dorothy Parker, on the other hand, began to act strangely. The unusual part was that Dorothy gave Camille Anderson, who was still at the clinic, a lot of extra attention. Dorothy would initially enter the room to fix the patient's pillow when it shifted to the side and to cover the patient with a blanket. The new nurse, on the other hand, began to spend practically all her free time in Camille's room, visiting 5 times per day. There was obviously something going on there, and it couldn't help but divert William Hall's attention. What is it that she wants from this sad woman? The chief doctor pondered the puzzle with trepidation. Meanwhile, Dorothy was having more and more heart-to-heart talks with Camille, who couldn't seem to get rid of the obnoxious nurse. Surprisingly, having the nurse spent so much time with Camille had a negative impact on the patient. According to William, her skin had turned as wide as Chuck's and her pulse was dangerously high. This didn't appear to be a puzzle that William could solve on his own. Only the women in the room seemed to be aware of what was going on. In an attempt to figure out what Dorothy was talking about, Camille, the clinic's head physician, took a desperate measure. As a result, William Hall contacted an old buddy who worked as a private investigator. William was able to obtain the little video camera intended for clandestine monitoring. Thanks to the help of a friend, William set up the video camera in the corner of Camille Anderson's room. When she fell asleep after taking her prescription, the camera was pointed at the patient's head by William. All William had to do now was wait for Dorothy to arrive and chat with the sick woman. Thankfully, he didn't have to wait long, because Camille's obnoxious nurse arrived to see her the same day, and William Hall's astonishment knew no bounds when he reviewed the video footage. Dorothy Parker was shown in the video to be unpleasant and mean. So what's the point? Is this where you're still lying? It's all right, don't stand up. Just keep in mind that we have your son. We'll leave you and your family alone. If you tell us the code to your safe deposit box, you'll never see your kid again if you don't, Dorothy yelled angrily, oblivious to the fact that her every word was being taped by a concealed camera. William Hall had no choice but to take this horrifying footage to the nearest police station. After watching it, Dorothy was apprehended soon after and delivered her initial testimony under the threat of indisputable proof. She turned out to be the mistress of Francis Anderson, Camille's invalid husband. Furthermore, it was discovered that the young, attractive man was not who he claimed to be. Camille was a wealthy widow, and Francis was a con artist who specialized in them. Her businessman husband had died in a tragic vehicle accident. The gorgeous man decided to get his hands on the naive woman's fortune. After enchanting her to do so, he married Camille, a woman who already had a son from a previous marriage. Francis believed he was just a step away from being set for life. But Camille must have realized something was wrong because she changed the code of her safe deposit box, where she held all of her savings. The can, on the other hand, had no idea when he caused Camille's vehicle accident, which landed her in the hospital bed. The woman lived, as fate would have it, and Francis attempted to extract the code from her. That's why he sent Dorothy Parker, his accomplice and mistress, to the clinic, where she was to train as a nurse. Every day, the woman threatened Camille's son in an attempt to extract the coveted code from her. Fortunately, the criminal duo was apprehended before they could do any serious damage. Thanks to William's diligence, and for the first time in several weeks, the woman felt secure. It had only been a month since Francis and Dorothy were jailed when the patient began to feel much better, and was finally able to express her gratitude to the clinic's chief for all his assistance. Looking at Camille Anderson, William recognized he had acquired feelings for her. Feelings that could evolve into true love. It's difficult to say whether their meeting was predetermined or if it was all a fluke. Whatever the case may be, the surgeon knew he'd found his genuine match.